The first member writes and says, yesterday my paper shredder at home jammed up. Now, I realize this isn't a service call and you didn't ask for my advice, but the first tip is that it's a paper shredder and it wasn't meant to shred like, car parts and old refrigerators and stuff. But we'll assume that you only just put paper in it. You said, I couldn't get it unjammed, so I asked my co-tenant, John, if he would take it out to the curb for garbage this morning. I noticed John had not taken the shredder out for garbage day today, but I said to myself that it's none of my business when he does it, that I've asked him and now it's out of my hands. That's pretty brilliant. We tend to ask people and we tend to ask them again and again and nag them, and by the time they do it, they hate that they agreed to do it and they won't do something the next time. If only people just let go of things like you just did. I asked him, he knows about it, he'll take care of it. Most of the time, that's true. You continue. I had an opportunity to speak to John tonight about a different matter, and he asked me what was wrong with the shredder. When I told him, he said, well, maybe I can fix it. He did, and with his brute strength and a screwdriver kind of tool, he unjammed it. And now it works, and I was happy, and I thanked him very much. You never know where help can come from. And I can pretty much promise you, if you'd nagged him, he wouldn't have gone to the trouble to fix it. He would have felt attacked. So, nice result times 2. You got it fixed, and you were peaceful in the meantime. You say, I'm feeling so lucky tonight, so fortunate to have a handyman who's a co-tenant. He saved me the price of a new shredder. Real love helped me see that after I asked John to carry the heavy shredder to the curb for garbage day, it was none of my business when he does it. And I'm so grateful that he offered to fix it first. Oh, let me say that again because it was so good. Everybody needs to hear this. Once I asked, it was none of my business when he does it. Now, there's some things, like I suppose, rotten garbage where it would get stinky, in which case, what would you do? You would divide it into lighter loads and take it out yourself, as opposed to nagging somebody else. We just nag people to death. We're demanding. Then we get disappointed. And because you didn't do that, you got cooperation. That happens a lot. Nice work. New subject. I know a woman, we'll call her Sarah, who had not spoken to her son, Matt, for nearly 30 years. 30. I helped her, write him emails, letters, very casual, just, thinking about you, sitting out here, watching the sunset, thinking of you, love you, Mom, because she didn't know how to do that. So I just gave her some sample things that she could say. Very short, very non-clingy, what we would tend to do is, I've really missed you. See, it sounds so innocent, doesn't it? They haven't communicated in 30 years, and the number really isn't important. Even if you haven't talked to somebody in 2 weeks, I commonly, as I talk to people at the beginning of a Skype call, people say, oh, well, long time no talk. I don't say anything. I don't respond to those kind of comments at all because they're kind of silly. Well, if it's been a long time, do you want me to take responsibility for it? It's a subtle way of blaming. So it's been a long time since we've talked. And so if you'd not wanted it to be a long time, you could certainly have called sooner. So here she hasn't written in 30 years. So tempting to say, it's been a long time, really missed you. Why haven't we spoken? I'd like to clear some things up. Blah, 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 blah. She didn't do that. Just simple little sentences, thinking of you. He responded after 30 years. Turns out the reason he hadn't been responding for 30 years was a series of terrible events that both he and she were involved in, and it was just awful, but it doesn't matter. It's now going beautifully. Then the son, Matt, wrote and said that he had visited Sarah's brother and that he had asked her brother not to talk about it to Sarah. Now, can you see why? It's been 30 years since he's spoken to her. He's just kind of exploring this relationship with his mother after 30 years, kind of for the first time. He wanted to keep the two relationships separate. He didn't want her gathering information about him from her brother. Well, that's pretty smart. I can't tell you how many phone calls I've had where people are gossiping about their family. Well, my family did this, my brother did this, my brother said this to my sister, who said this to my cousin, who did. Holy smoke. By the end of the call, I can't even remember who's who. No kidding. Or how it started. Families would do way better not to talk about everybody to each other. Way better. You want to talk about you? Go ahead. But to talk about somebody else, I guess if they wanted really the person that you're talking to hear what you're saying, they would already have said it, wouldn't they? So you're really talking about them without their permission. And I get asked those kind of questions a lot. So what's going on with, and they name somebody. And I say, well, I guess you ought to ask them. If they want to tell you, they'll tell you. So then it turns into gossip, comparing. We get little factions within the family, little cliques. It's just awful. And so here's Matt, the son, after 30 years going, yeah, how about if we don't do that? She wrote to me and she said, I felt sad that Matt, her son, was at my brother's cottage and that my brother never mentioned it to me, nor did he mention another occasion when the two of them got together. Why sad? You would be sad only if you were taking this personally. Here Matt is talking to you after 30 years, and you choose to be sad that you are not informed of a visit to somebody else who's none of your business. Yeah, he happens to be your brother, but who cares? It's none of your business. And where your son did not give your brother permission to talk about it. That doesn't make any sense at all that you would be sad. You'd think instead you'd be celebrating the fact that your son's communicating. In fact, it's kind of selfish and demanding of you, considering what you are getting, to fuss about some tiny little thing. Certainly not grateful. You continue. Yes, I did take it personally. Thanks for pointing that out. As I write this, I'm working on changing my attitude to one of gratitude. No, my attitude doesn't make sense. I see how empty I am. We do this a lot. We're getting what we want, and then we fuss about what we're not getting. It's really not possible to be grateful and anything else that's bad, anything else that's unpleasant. You can't be grateful and whining, complaining, nagging, bitter, hateful, resentful, unhappy. You can't do any of those things. Gratitude is really kind of the peak of all the other virtues. They all combine together. Faith, trust, caring, persistence, courage. They all culminate in gratitude. Gratitude eliminates all of the negative things. And yet we do it very little. And the instant we're fussing about something, we're not grateful. How do you tell somebody's not grateful? So easy. Are they complaining? They're not grateful. Couples, parents, children, we need to, frankly, just shut up. Just people say, well, how do I stop complaining? Well, I have found it effective to press my upper lip and my lower lip together and keep them there. It's very difficult to complain out your nose. Just be quiet and feel gratitude. Why? Because it works. Because the other stuff doesn't. Change your focus. It's actually foolish to even think about some imagined offense. My brother didn't tell me about my son visiting. So your son doesn't send you messages about what he had for breakfast every morning either. How nosy do we get to be? And with that ingratitude, you won't do well in developing your relationship with Matt. You will feel resentful. You'll feel hesitant. You'll feel withdrawn, and he'll feel it. So by being ungrateful, you'll ruin what you do have. How crazy is that? And not unique to you. It's very common. So make a choice. Be grateful or not. I'm going to choose to be grateful today, just for fun. Actually, literally, for fun. New subject. The writer says, I have a hard time when I feel forced to talk about something that I'm not interested in talking about with other people. And it happens a lot. I'll bet it does. People have a strong tendency, I've been around a few thousand, to ask intrusive questions, questions that they have no business knowing. Why are you doing that? Where are you going? Why did you choose that? What is so-and-so doing? None of them are any of their business. They ask intrusive questions and then they keep going. They believe because they are curious, they have the right to get all the information they want from you. Why? Because it gives them a sense of power. Because they feel entitled. If you watch, the people who ask intrusive questions tend to feel entitled about a lot of things. Sometimes it's just oblivious cluelessness that causes people to ask questions that are just, well, dumb. Sometimes they're just excited to see you, and questions just babble out of their mouths. Sometimes they ask questions for the purpose of exciting or perpetuating drama. There are a lot of reasons to ask them, but that doesn't obligate us to answer them. You continue. Let's say that someone says that I need to talk about what annoyed me yesterday. They saw that something annoyed me and now they want me to talk about it. Sometimes I just don't want to right then. But right now, I don't have any good words for telling that person that I will discuss this with you at another time, but not now. I don't know how to say this in a nice way without them feeling insulted. You see the insanity of this, right? Here's somebody asking an intrusive question that's none of their business, and you're worried that they might feel insulted that they asked the intrusive question. That would be like somebody walking down the street, opening your front door, walking in, sitting down on a couch and eating ice cream in your house, somebody you don't know without your permission. And then you're worried, gosh, how will I tell them that I'd really rather they not be here, but not hurt their feelings? Did you follow the metaphor? Because it's that ridiculous to worry about offending people who ask questions that are none of their business. You continue. Funny enough, it's actually easy to say that I will talk about it later when I'm in a bad mood, and people seem to understand bad mood. In a good mood, it seems to annoy people because they think I'm not sharing enough of my emotions. All right, so first the mood, good mood, bad mood thing. It's easy to say no in a bad mood. Why? Because you feel justified in saying no. You're in a bad mood. Everybody would understand that. And they wouldn't want you to talk while you're in a bad mood anyway. This isn't good for you because you feel like you have to justify your choices in order to be acceptable, and that makes you feel small. Now, what do you say to people who are intrusive and ask questions you don't want to answer? And the only reason I'm answering this question isn't so that you'll memorize whatever I say. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to say. So you memorize it and give it to people. I'm giving you some potential words so that you feel less afraid. That's it. military people who are in basic training. They practice shooting, they practice running, they practice climbing through ditches and mud and all that stuff that they do. And these days, they actually practice some of the exercises during what they call live fire drills. So that while they're crawling under the barbed wire, there are actual bullets whizzing above their head. Why? So they won't be afraid when there are bullets whizzing above their head. It matters that we feel confident. In World War II, they did a study. General Pershing, and he was related to the Pershing from General, pretty sure it was him, from the 4-star or 5-star general in World War I. But General Pershing gathered up all the weapons after a battle, and from every soldier, and all they did was look and see if the weapon had been fired. That's it. And they discovered that 80% of the weapons in the battle had not been fired at all. None. Can you imagine? So instead of having a force of 1,000 men confronting the enemy, you really only have a force of 200 men because the other 800 are useless. They're just sitting there scared out of their minds, peeing their pants probably. And it's understandable. If you've ever been around, and I have, not having weapons shot at me, but been around the sound of military weapons being fired, it's not like the movies. Not at all. It is so loud. It is so scary that many people just freeze. And that's what happened. So then they started doing live fire training and better drilling and better exercises. And they got it to the point where pretty much everybody shoots. Now, I'm not advocating war. This isn't a political comment. I'm just saying the more prepared we feel, the more confident, the less afraid. That's why I'm giving you some words. So let's take some people. Let's just make this realistic. People in Group A do tend to push other people, Group B, to be ready to have any conversation that Group A wants to have. You know these people. They come into the room and they change the conversation, and boy, they are going to finish this conversation if you have to die in the process. But Group A is treading on the rights and the freedoms of Group B, in this case, you. So what do you do in your case? Again, just some possibilities, not a script. And by the way, listen, it's all about the delivery. It's all about the tone. So no matter how perfectly you memorize the words and you know what to say, if you're afraid, you'll lose because they'll keep going. If you're angry, you're not going to feel peaceful. Everybody's going to get offended. It's going to be a mess. So some examples of what you could say. I'd really like to talk to you about that, whatever it is. But right now is not really the time for reasons that I'm not even sure of or don't want to talk about. If you'd like to bring this up again tomorrow, we'll see how I feel then. Now, understand, I've had a few conversations like this. Sometimes if you say that, the other person, because they're entitled and intrusive, will persist. They'll keep asking questions, even though you say, I don't want to talk about it right now. Why don't you want to talk about it? What's wrong with now? You never want to talk about it. I've heard them all. You don't answer their objections. Well, you never want to talk about it. It's an important subject. Blah, blah. You never, ever answer their objections once you've said no. Just like in sexual assaults, what's the phrase? No means no. They don't have to explain why. Well, no, because, not a good day for me. No means no. So if they persist, I will say, literally, and you can too, was there any part of what I just said that was vague? Now what you've done is you've put the question back in their court. Well, no, there was no part of it that wasn't vague. If it's your partner who wants to persist, you don't say tomorrow. You give them an exact time. Now, it might be tomorrow at 10 a.m., when you will find them. Why? Why different with your partner? Because partnerships are a different kind of relationship. And it's a real gift you're offering to specify when you'll talk about this thing. Since they were the one who started the conversation for their benefit, you are giving them a gift by saying when you will finish the conversation. It's great. New subject. This is from a coach, a real love coach, who writes and says, I know a mother who tells me that her adult son in college is really snotty and entitled, especially to her. Less to his father. Yeah, I'll bet. In fact, I'll bet his father's bigger than he is. But he's also snotty to his siblings. So the mother is thinking that the next step, if this continues, is to tell the kid that he will have to leave home. But she's pretty sure that her husband will rescue the son and refused to throw the kid out. So what do I do? Because we got mom who wants the kid to leave because he's snotty and a bully and nasty, and dad who's weak-willed and wants to keep the kid and who doesn't get as much snottiness from the kid because the kid's more afraid of his dad. So how do we handle this? This appears to be absolutely insoluble, doesn't it? Well, I happen to know that both parents agreed more than a year ago that if this kid continued in his snottiness to his mother, that he would be told he had to go and that he couldn't live there. But see, dad continued to ignore the issue because he doesn't want his son offended at him, since dad has pretty much everybody in the world offended at him because he's weak-willed and pretty selfish. And mom didn't have the guts to do anything about it. So after a year of determining that the boy would be required to live on his own, he's in college. He's not a little kid. After a year of this, we're right back where we started. So the coach says, question, what do you advise parents of an entitled adult child where one parent doesn't agree with the ultimatum that the child will need to leave? Depends. If the child is being snotty to one parent, in this case the mother, then the father really doesn't have to agree to throw the kid out. Why? Because father doesn't have to put up with the abusive foolishness that the kid throws at the mother. So if the father is afraid to teach the child a lesson, why should the father have the right to essentially imprison the mother with the abuse, the assault, actually, of the child? Let me read that again to make sure it was clear. Because of the phrasing, it might not have been. If the child is being snotty to one parent, then the father doesn't have to be in agreement with throwing the kid out, but the kid still has to be thrown out. I don't think I said that very well. In fact, I'm positive I didn't. The father doesn't have to put up with the abuse, and so he doesn't have to agree, but he still has to do it. Because otherwise, the father is imprisoning his partner, the mother, with the abuse, the emotional assault of the child. Did we get that? So the child's got to go. Whether the father agrees, he doesn't have to agree, but he still has to go. Oh, and here's what I meant to say, and I apologize, it took me for a while. The father doesn't have to agree that with what the son is doing, because it's not happening to him. He has to agree with his wife. We've talked about this before. Couples have to agree before exercising a preference, like spending money. But they don't have to agree if one person is being assaulted. That's what and I apologize again for making that vague. The father doesn't have to agree, but he still has to do it. So it would be like, I'm smoking in an elevator, and I don't agree that I have to put my cigarette out, but I still have to. That's what I meant to say, and didn't say it very well. In fact, it's now become a law. Because people were doing that, because people were smoking in elevators, restaurants, whatever, and affecting other people, they had the sense to see that secondhand smoke isn't nothing, that it's an assault on another person. Get that? It's an assault. Secondhand smoke is an assault to your smell, to your lungs, there's lots of ways to assault people. And so it's now against the law in every state I know of in the United States, in a restaurant or a public place to smoke. I'm actually kind of stunned that ever happened. I really thought the smoking lobby would win. So couples don't have to agree if just one person is being assaulted, but the person who's doing the assaulting has to stop it. Let's take, for example, I know a couple where he sleeps with the television on. He doesn't agree that the television should be turned off because, see, he can sleep easily with the television on. It helps him. Well, then, see, they have these really clever devices. They're about this big. It's called a jack, and you stick it in the television, and then you put headphones on, and you can listen to the television all by yourself. But he doesn't have a right to assault his wife with audibly so that she can't sleep. I know a couple where she smokes and he doesn't. One cannot assault the other. Or a neighbor who says, well, I have a right to make all the noise that I want to in my apartment. Yeah, not if it affects the neighbors in the adjacent apartment. And in fact, in some police departments, they walk around and they have sound meters and they stand in the next door neighbor's apartment. And if the sound is above a certain level, then they require the neighbor who's making too much noise to turn it off. If they persist, they take them to jail. Bottom line. If the son is misbehaving and is causing pain to one parent, the other parent doesn't have to agree with the assessment, but he does have to support the person who's being assaulted. Now are we clear? And I apologize for the fuzziness as I read it the first time. New subject. Lately, I've been replacing my I'm sorries with thank yous instead. So instead of I'm sorry I was late, I say thank you for waiting for me. That's really very clever. It has shifted not only the way I think and feel about myself, because when I would say I'm sorry all the time, I would feel small, but it's affected relationships with other people who now get to receive my gratitude instead of my feeling bad about something I did. That's really lovely. And I'm grateful that you sent that. I'll use your line. Thank you. New subject. I know a woman who was raised in a basement, pretty much like a dog, from early childhood on. Fed, clothed, warm, clean, but nurtured in absolutely no way. Taught nothing. Homeschooled, in fact. And so didn't have the social association with other people. Raised like a pet in the basement and fed, which is, how you would treat a pet unkindly, actually. So she left the jail of home and went out into the world. She was completely unequipped. Absolutely. she didn't even know how to function in the world. She was loved by a lot of people. Not 5, not 10, I mean like 50 that I know of personally. And in the beginning, it's understandable that she had no place to put that love. She didn't have a file, even in her head, labeled love. She didn't have a folder called love or a box or a shelf. She didn't know what to do with it. But after years, she began to see things differently. But still, she had the old wounds and the old disabilities. She has a real problem keeping jobs, not getting them, but keeping them. Which, by the way, proves that there are jobs out there. But at work, she just disappears. Things get difficult. She just vanishes and takes a break for an hour and a half. Turns out employers aren't really fond of that particular technique. Doesn't come into work at all if she gets up in the morning and she's just tired. She gets angry when she's given instructions. Difficult to teach, and on and on. She finally got a job where she was doing pretty well, but she began to miss days of work because she had a cold or because she didn't feel good. And I wrote and I told her, too bad. Tough. You just work. She wrote, I was tired at work today. So even though I knew I was taking a huge gamble, I left in the middle of the shift on a busy day. Gamble. I probably wouldn't use the word gamble. This would be like Russian roulette, but with all of the chambers filled with the bullet. Eventually the gun will go off. You've already missed days of work. This is the best job you've ever had. Every time you miss a day or leave early, that could be what tips you over in your boss's mind, and then you're done. Once your boss forms the opinion that you're not reliable, it's just a matter of time before you're gone. In fact, sometimes it's a matter of 2 minutes. And after a pattern of being fired enough times, which you're already discovering, look at the lengths it took you to get this job. It was way harder than the job before that. And every job before that was easier to get. It's getting harder and harder. It's getting almost impossible because of your work history. You continue. I had stayed in the bathroom for 30 minutes, going over and over my options, how I was going to get out. I'd gotten to the point of feeling so trapped in letting people use me. Now, everybody who's listening, you may not have a history of having lost, in her case, easily 30 jobs. But listen to this part. Listen to the language. This is language that a lot of employees use. She said, I'd gotten to the point of feeling trapped in letting people use me. Well, yeah, of course they use you. In fact, they pay you to be used. No kidding. They needed to use somebody to accomplish a job, and they actually offered the job to you, telling you that you would be used. They told you that they would pay you to be used. You agreed to be used, and now you resent being used. Yeah, see, that doesn't make very much sense. And that's true with everybody who complains about their job. Lots of people write me and say, I don't like my job, they use me. Do they pay you? Yes. Do you cash the check? Yes. Then shut up and do the job. Or if it's sufficiently miserable, quit and get another one. Well, I don't want to quit the job. Well, then be quiet. You continue. I felt like I lacked the power and competence to stop being used. So I just left the job and walked around for a few hours. Leaving early is a step toward being fired. I still care about you, but if you had the energy to go walking around for a few hours, you could have stayed and done the job. It's just a job. You're supposed to be used on a job. Not a good decision. This is what gets you fired. And my saying this is loving, because I care enough about you to teach you one of the 3 legs of the stool of happiness that you're missing consistently: responsibility. It's killing you. You consistently make it impossible to be happy because you're not responsible. You continue. I could feel that the solution I came to was right, to finally just do it, to all the way to stop being a doormat and stop submitting to being used, because I felt peace wash over me, feeling alive, because I wasn't going to let these people use me. I just couldn't count how many times people have told me, I know I made the right decision because I just felt peaceful. No, what you felt was relief from having to be responsible. Relief isn't the same as peaceful. How often have people told me that a bad decision was good because they felt good? No, they're the wrong feelings. Eating cookies feels good, but that doesn't make eating them good for you. You just enjoyed the freedom of not being responsible. Instead of leaving, you needed to change your perspective and realize that you're in a job where you're paid to be used. You continue. She gave examples of how people asked her to do things. Now I'm describing my verbal conversation with her. She gave examples of how people asked her to do things at the last minute and other people didn't work as hard as she did and blah, 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 blah. You can always find something unfair about your job, actually about life, always. The interesting thing is we can only find the things that are unfair against us. For example, the woman who's writing to me and talking to me, she doesn't find it unfair that they pay her while she sits in the bathroom for 30 minutes and cries about her frustration. That's not unfair. And yet it is. I have discovered that pretty much I've been given so much good in my life that the injustice is that I've been given too much. And if I look at it that way, really helps me to shut my mouth and not complain about stuff. She concludes, I feel like there's no place I can just move forward and do the job I was hired to do. You hear this? Complete victimhood. There's no place I can just move forward and do the job I was hired to do. Can't do the job? That makes no sense at all. What you mean is there's no place where you can do the job you want to do, not the job you're hired to do, and be paid plenty for doing whatever you want when you want. I don't know a job like that. Even some people say, well, I just can't stand having an employer, so I'll work for myself. And it turns out that they're really terrible employers of themselves. You want a job that's easy, requires no training, and makes lots of money. So do I. So does everybody. And such jobs just don't exist. You just do the job. But instead you complain about it and walk out in midday and miss days of work. As a surgeon, I worked for 20 years. I missed 0 days of work. Now, there were days I was sick, I was tired, I didn't feel like working. There were days that I was halfway through an operation and said, excuse me just for a second, I'll be right back. Went out into the hallway and threw up in the sink and then regowned and regloved and came back in and finished the operation. You just do the job. Why? Because it has to be done. And I didn't feel, as Canadians would say, hard done by. It wasn't unfair. It's just how it is. So do the job or quit. But don't be dishonest in excusing your absences and in leaving midday, or for all the rest of us who haven't lost 30 jobs, don't be dishonest in being paid while complaining about the job you agreed to do in the first place, which a lot of us do. I don't mean a lot as in a few. I mean a lot as in most of us do this. New subject. Sylvie. Sylvie, who's now 7, I hope. Sylvie said the other day, Mama, I don't think that there's makeup in heaven, because makeup hides who you are, and in heaven, you don't have to hide who you are. You get to be yourself. I am not speaking against makeup, not at all. You wear makeup, I'm not talking about you. I'm just showing how delightful it is for a child to realize that in a place of love, which she calls heaven, you get to be completely yourself. You don't have to hide your blemishes. You don't have to hide your flaws. You get to be you. And we can create that heaven right here, right now. Pretty cool. New subject. I talked to a couple, Mark and Tammy. Tammy invited her sister and her husband to dinner, but she did not talk to her husband, Mark, first to get his opinion. Turns out that there's been some tension lately between Mark and Tammy's sister. So it would have been wise, for a couple of reasons, for Tammy to check with Mark before making the invitation. So now what? Mark asks me. He says, I have this tension with Mark, who's the husband. I have this tension with Tammy's sister. They were invited without my consultation, and now I have to deal with the tension, and I wasn't consulted about that either. I said, talk about it until you work it out. Really? I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you can talk to Tammy until you're both completely happy about the solution. And if you're not completely happy about the solution, about what you're going to do, then you don't do anything. Because otherwise, like the smoking example we were using earlier, and the rude child to the parent, you don't have to have anybody in your house who would be an assault. He said, well, what good would talking do? I said, the two of you, he said, we've already talked about this. Not really, no. You haven't talked without getting all hurt and angry. I'm saying real talking about a real issue, not we're going to get together and be offended together. No, real talking. So let's talk now. All of us, let's come up with solutions and not talk about who's hurt and who's angry and blah, 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 blah. So there are some real solutions. For example, they could still come over, Tammy's sister and her husband, and Tammy could touch Mark during the dinner just to help him feel loved. And if he feels loved, would he feel loved enough that he could live with the tension of having Tammy's sister there? Or in fact, would he even care? I've done this with many couples, and it turns out that if one partner supports the other, they don't really care about anything else that's going on. She just sits next to him and keeps her hand on his leg, helping him to feel loved, which has not usually been the case. Or another solution is cancel the dinner. There's another solution. Solutions are everywhere. And if we're just talking, not being offended, we can see them. So we've got touching Mark, helping him to feel loved, and they still come over. We got cancel the dinner, don't have it at all. I wouldn't have anybody in my house that I didn't want to have be here. Donna wouldn't ask somebody to come that she really wanted to have for dinner if it would make me uncomfortable. Or she could say, I really would like to have this particular person who's coming from Afghanistan. I'll never see them again. I would like to spend some time with them. And I could say, well, sure. And I'll go to, Texas Longhorn and have a 14-ounce New York strip. And I'll be happy and she'll be happy. And I'd probably take somebody with me. I don't know. There are lots of solutions, but not as long as our goal is to be offended or to be right. New subject. Here's somebody who says, I have a friend who was involved in a terrible accident recently, and now she is a quadriplegic. She used to be athletic and vibrant, and I would like to join other people who are volunteering to be with her and help her. I feel awkward about how to be with her, how to respond when I first see her. It's a huge change. Her body is different. She looks different. She obviously can't get around like she used to. The only way that she can power her wheelchair is by using her head. and she has minimal movement in her hands. It's a huge life change. I can't imagine what she's going through. No, you really can't, nor can I. How would you recommend that I talk to her? How do I be with her, especially when I first see her? What can I say? I've had a lot of experience doing this. Do not look at her as a cripple. Don't see her as changed. Who she really is still there. Disabled people, and I don't know what the currently politically correct term is. It went from disabled to handicapped to challenged to I now just give up. Disabled people hate being treated with kid gloves like people are walking on eggshells. How would you like it? They just hate it. They feel the pity. They feel the condescension. So talk to her. Look past her quadriplegia and talk to her. She's there. Don't talk to her body. Ask her how she's handling all this emotionally. How's it going for you? How do you feel most of the day? How do you feel when people come to visit? Give her a chance to talk about the fact that she hates condescension. If you open up the subject, they'll talk about it. She'll talk about it. Do not artificially praise her strength. They hate that too. Oh, I so admire your courage. Do you want to guess how many times they've heard that? And heard it spoken insincerely by somebody who just wants to come up with something to say because they don't know what else to say? Don't express sympathy. Oh, I'm so sorry this has happened to you. They did a study once where they analyzed events, and then they analyzed the happiness of people at, call it 0.0. And then an event happened. Then they analyzed their happiness 5 years later. It turns out that the effect on happiness was the same for winning the lottery and becoming a paraplegic. It's not the event. It's who we are. It's what we make of everything. Many people are absolutely ruined by wealth, whereas some other people are ennobled. The greatness of their souls come out when they become severely injured. Don't express sympathy. Don't say, I'm so sorry. What if she's not? What if she's just learning to find the grace inside her, and then you say, you're so sorry for it? That's not going to make it fun for her. So just talk to her like a friend, like she's always been. You can ask about how she's feeling, like I said, but don't be sad. One of the craziest events I ever see, I won't go to them anymore, pretty much, is to go to a wake, to go where people gather together and they eat a meal or they stand in line and everybody comes over to the chair, or worse, they have the widow of the guy who's died, or it could be the widower, but in this case, we'll say the widow, standing there in line, and 200 people parade by and say, oh, I'm so sorry. And now not only is she grieving, but she has to make everybody who comes through the line feel better. You're kidding. Or be in the kitchen and feed them. It's nuts. So don't be sorry for your friend. Don't be sad so she has to comfort you. Just go and, well, love her. Just treat her like a person, which is, she still is. New subject. I know a woman who just decompensates when she spends time with her mother, just falls apart. Her mother taught her a world of guilt, obligation, fear, and pain. So this woman grew up controlled by fear caused by her mother. In this case, she was an actual victim of her mother's fear and pain. She was victimized. Little children are the true victims of the world. And now her mother still interacts with her and triggers the pain that she originally caused. That's a particularly difficult thing. Once somebody's been injured as a child, they could be triggered by almost anything, just like any PTSD. So like a warrior goes over to battle and he gets PTSD from gunshots and loud noises and bullets whizzing by him, and he can be triggered by a falling plate, a loud noise. But I promise you, he'll be triggered even more by the sound of, say, an M16 firing next to his head, because it's so much closer to the original trauma. Well, this happens in families all the time. The parent comes along and triggers in their adult child the wounds that they caused in the first place. Yeah, that's pretty tough. It's awful. So mom drains this adult woman, just empties her out with hello, just the tone in her voice, happiness gone, which then affects her happiness. It affects her husband. It affects her marriage. It affects her kids. It goes on and on. So it's kind of like this. And I say it just because there are so many people who are triggered in this way, and it gives us kind of a mental picture of what's happening. So in childhood, the mother caused, and I'm making this up, I realize, but it's not far off, let's say 67% of her now adult child's original pain and fear. So as a child, the mother caused all of it, 99%. Now as an adult, the child's pain is, say, caused 67% by her mother. Her mother is now provoking an additional 14% of her pain. In between is the 19% caused by, teachers, friends, husband, let's just call it life. I suggested that she couldn't take this anymore. She couldn't take 67 plus 14%. Who could? And that she might consider a time away from her mother. So she wrote, she said, first, I'm experiencing a kind of relief, because she did agree to spend time away from her mother. Now, it's also mixed with a little bit of horror, but I feel relieved. You do. And because I talked to her on the phone, I could tell that she did. It's mostly relief. You are really, really tired of being imprisoned by your mother, absolutely tortured. Parents continuing to inflict pain on their adult children is so common that it's accepted as normal. I've known adult parents who show up in court and lie and testify against their adult children so that they don't get as much time with their children as the ex-husband. In other words, the grandparents are now testifying against the parents so that the children, the grandchildren, don't get to spend time with their parents. People can be extraordinarily hateful when they're afraid. The lady that I suggested stay away from her mother continues to write. She says, number 2, I have a sick feeling of fear that if I don't spend time with my mother, it makes me a bad daughter. What will my brother and sister and friends think of me to abandon a sweet, lonely old lady like that? Well, she is old and lonely. And I don't have any negative feelings toward her. She doesn't realize how much she traumatized you as a child, and she doesn't realize how much she continues to do it now, but not sweet. And all of those people that you're worried about, all of them, every single one of them doesn't understand you. Not one of them gets you. Not one of them gets your pain. They don't know you or love you. They never did. So I'm finding it really hard to care what they think. and you might consider finding it hard too. 3, you say, I'm afraid that she will fall in her home and no one will be there to help her. Oh, honey, there are so many ways to take care of that now. I mean, on television, there are infomercials pretty much on a channel 24/7 that describe aids that older people can carry with them to send out some kind of radio signal to somebody when they've fallen. The original commercial that everybody made fun of for so many years was, I've fallen and I can't get up. I can't even imagine how many devices were sold because of that clever little sales scheme. But these things exist. Somebody will come. An ambulance, other family members, whoever. But it doesn't have to be you. Being with your mother is killing you and your husband and your marriage and your children and, well, it's killing your life. So you can't afford to go over there and be the person who picks her up. Somebody else can do that. You couldn't pick her up on your own anyway. Number 4, you say, I'm afraid that she'll get sick. She'll become more immobile and needy and that there will be no one there to help her. Well, right, because you would be the only person on earth at the time. It's your mother when she gets old and immobile, and you. Everybody else will be dead. No, dear, your fear is unreasonable. Again, somebody will help her. She'll move into an assisted living center. She'll get government assistance. She'll live in a nursing home. But if you help her, it will kill you. So she's already had her life. She's already very old. She's had a chance to be happy. Well, she had the time to be happy. She really didn't have a chance to be happy. She was injured as a child just like you, and I feel bad about that. I do, really feel bad about that. But she's shown that she's not willing to learn anything. You are. We just as well have one person be alive. Let's have it be you. So she's going to get the help, but you don't have to give up the happiness of you and your family and everybody else to do it. For example, I'm happy to pick somebody up who's fallen, but if the price is my life for their comfort, not so much. You continue. I'm afraid that if she were actually dead, it would be so much easier. Now, there's the truth. A big part of you is actually hoping that she'll die so that you don't have to deal with all this. That tells you what you really want to do. You feel guilty about this, but it's the truth. She's sucking your soul, and you can't allow it to continue. You continue. There must be something wrong with me that I can't see her and not be affected by her. She's not that bad. Oh, I agree. She's not that bad. There's that word again that you use fairly often, bad. She's not bad, but she is harmful to you. And there's not something wrong with you. Your life is just severely affected by pain, which was inflicted by your mother. You continue. She didn't do anything to deserve this, and I'm being so selfish, and she'll be upset, and she'll feel the horrible pain of not feeling good enough, and I will have caused it, and I'm afraid of being attacked by my brother, and it just sort of goes on and on and on and on. The bottom line is this. There are lots of people who can help her. She loudly screams that it needs to be you. So she uses the same chain now that's around your neck and that she forged when you were a child. You really get to let go of the chain. You really get to unlock it and learn to be happy. And once you're happy, then you can decide how much time you can spend with her with no guilt, no obligation, none of that. Right now, you do it all out of guilt and obligation. So how do you know that you're ready to spend time with her? When you want to, and you don't feel guilty or obligated. When you can give her love freely. So what are we doing again? How will this change when we bring love into this situation. First, it has to be to you. And then when you have enough, you'll have something to offer her. Do things in the right order. We'll see you next week.